Hello, Ramona.
Hello, Carolyn.
It's nice of you to jump on Zoom early this morning to share your journey.
And what a journey it's been.
What a journey it's been. And that's why I wanted to have you on. And you have a lot to share. Just to backtrack, last week we're texting on Messenger, and you're like, I've done this test and I've done that test. And have you thought about that test? And have you thought about this? And I was like, I was in bed with food poisoning and yet very alert. And I was like, oh, what is that? Oh, what is that? But I couldn't get out of bed because I felt like writing notes, but I couldn't get out of bed. And then I thought, hey, this would be a good conversation to have on the podcast because you're the perfect example of someone who has taken their health into their own hands to the point where you changed career. And you'll tell me where you're at with that. And you've made a lot of progress on your journey to glow. And that's always like, if there's one fundamental principle that we teach on Journey to Glow is empowerment. And if you're not getting the right answers from your doctors, you got to be equipped to get your own answers and to do research. And again, it's back to taking the healing process into your own hands until you get the results that you want to get.
Absolutely. And that is exactly it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, you're the perfect example of sharing your journey. It's almost like you're here today to share your journey. And my intention is to inspire other women on their journey to glow to see what's possible when you do your own research and you feel empowered to look for solutions. And I'm sure you're going to share that with us, but I'm not saying that it's always been empowering and uplifting and not hard. Because I've seen you post on Facebook sometimes, that you're like, WTF, when is this? So let's just put things into context and um, tell us, where do you want to start? Tell us, where do you want to start?
Where do we start? Probably the beginning, I guess, not to drag it out, but just sort of give an overview of where I'm coming from. So it was I lost track of the years. I think it was 2018, sitting in my naturopath's office across from her. She pulls out the slip of paper. Yes, you have tested positive for SIBO.
Okay.
And in that moment, it was like it was relief, because leading up to that, probably, I tried to pinpoint how long, maybe about 3, even maybe 4 years, starting with some digestive symptoms. I'd gone to her initially to get some food sensitivity testing done, that kind of thing, thinking, gosh, it must be something I'm eating. Like, I don't understand. I always ate very healthy. I've always been health conscious, used to be a big runner, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, why am I having this? So, after kind of going back and forth, seeing my medical doctor, and they not really being able to give me the answers that I wanted, I went back to her and she says, yeah, I think this is SIBO. What my symptoms was I was bloating almost immediately after eating pretty much anything,
Okay.
having a very uncomfortable abdomen, changing in bowel habits that kind of, went back and forth between constipation, diarrhea, and yeah, not being able to figure this out. I'm like, I'm eating like good stuff, right? So got this diagnosis of SIBO. For those that don't know, that stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and basically have an overgrowth of bacteria where it shouldn't be. We need bacteria in the colon, the large intestine, not in the small intestine. And what I was doing with not out knowing was eating things with lots of fiber, eating, other kinds of carbohydrates that can be in fruits and vegetables that bacteria just loved. And it would ferment. And that's why I would get this bloating going on. So, from there, I was like, all right, let's get to work. I immediately, because I geek out on this stuff anyway, I guess I'm lucky that way, but I just immediately wanted to know everything I could about it. So I really immersed myself into that world, got on lots of podcasts, followed the researchers that were researching this, really kind of gave myself a PhD in gut health and SIBO, IBS, all of that stuff, so that I could really like you said, you have to educate yourself. You have to advocate for yourself so that when I went to medical appointments, I would know if what they were telling me made sense, if that's the avenue I wanted to go down, were there other options? I'm very blessed, I have to say, that I'm in a situation where my medical doctor is really on board. He admitted flat out, knows pretty much nothing about this, but wanted to be on my side and help me through it. So I would have to present things to him in the terms that he understood. And that's why, again, educating myself on that was so important. So it wouldn't be like, getting the eye roll of him thinking, oh, here she goes. She watched some episode of Dr. Oz, now
Yeah.
she's diagnosing herself, right?
Yeah.
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 So luckily in speaking their language, they're more apt to listen. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you are lucky. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's important to point out that, how do you say in English? But, the general medicine doesn't really know about SIBO.
Oh,
And I won't name any names, but there is a doctor in my family who didn't know. And I was shocked. I was like, how do you not know about SIBO? Like, how does not, and I forget who I talked to recently on the podcast, but one of my experts on gut health, and she said, or it might be one of the million podcasts that I've listened to, just like you, and they said, it might have been Dr. Nirola Jacobi, the SIBO doctor, and they said very soon SIBO will be much better understood in mainstream medicine. Probably way more humans are walking on the planet with SIBO and they don't know it, but that's the more specific gut condition that they have rather than the broad general IBS label. So you're lucky that you had a doctor that listened. Good for you, because that's one way. And so we're in Canada. I'm in Quebec. Ramona is in Calgary, and I'm assuming that your medical system is similar to Quebec and that it's all paid if you have your little card.
yep.
And hence wanting to go to the doctor to get some tests done as opposed to do all functional testing, which we're going to talk about because you've also told me how much money you've spent. Yeah, I was kind of shocked. I'm getting to that point too, but using our doctors, for testing, and knowing that they don't have access to all the functional testing, but at least to get things done as much as possible. So
Yeah,
what
and
did,
I
go ahead.
started there. I went in, I said, look, I'm having some GI symptoms. Okay, fine. We're going to test you for, um, H. pylori, right? Which is a common infection that can lead to things like ulcers. So went ahead and did that, came back in, got the result negative. And I said, I know it's negative. And he's looking at me, and he's like, so basically, in IBS, it's a diagnosis of exclusion, right? They don't really have, well, they think they don't have a test for it. Well, I'll talk about that. So, we can't figure it out. So bing, bang, boom, you have IBS, right? I said, do you want to know what I think it is? He's like, yes, So that's when I had gone in literally with papers, highlighted in yellow. I said, I think it is SIBO. I actually already had the test. It's already positive. Let me explain this to you. Right. And that's how we sort of began our journey together. But yeah, like everything, so many people that I know, they're like, yeah, I've got issues. Oh, I've had IBS for years. IBS, IBS, IBS. Right. And I said, you can actually do something about that. What? And it doesn't just mean taking a medication. And people are shocked. And they're shocked when I tell them that current research is showing, depends on what research you look at, but we could be safe to say 60% of IBS is SIBO. And I learned also Canada has the highest level of IBS worldwide.
Why is that?
Great question, right?
The food we eat.
Food, lifestyle, is it the GMO? We're eating a lot of grain.
Yeah, GMO for sure.
GMO grain, right? It's these kinds of things, the glyphosates in a
Yeah.
lot of things, our bodies are just, not meant to handle such a toxic load. And I mean, you've talked about this, right? It's all what we put in, what we put on, and it's like a bucket, that you fill it up, you fill it up, you fill it up. After a while, that's water, so to speak, of what you're filling in your bucket has to go somewhere. It's going to manifest physically in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the GMO. I was watching a documentary the other day that was explaining what it is, and I'm not going to try to re-explain it. But the genetically modified organism and how they actually do that, and the organism that they introduce into the grain, there was like a diagram showing us like the actual organism introduced into the grain to protect it
Mhm.
against attacks from other organism. And to think that that is what I'm eating and that then comes into my gut, I don't want to have that.
Yeah.
And then the glyphosate that we all know now that it's so toxic and related to cancers, and Monsanto is being sued left and right. And one of
Yes.
the biggest, how do you say?
Well, there's, like the payout that
Lawsuit, yes,
lawsuits and payouts that they're doing in billions of dollars.
billions of dollars.
Yeah, I think, don't quote me, I think it was 32 billion.
It was
Because
an insane amount. Yeah.
Bayer now has taken over, I believe, the Monsanto brand, and had to pay out. And so it just boggles my mind. If they're paying out, why are these products still being used?
Oh,
You know?
seriously. I'm going to link
Yeah,
that lawsuit. I'm going to find it on Google. I'm going to link it in the show notes for people to
yeah,
see. And it's so interesting how it wasn't news for very long. How is that not bigger news?
yeah, yeah. It's crazy.
It's just shocking. It's shocking. So anyway, so we're eating that in our everyday life. And then, I'm hearing a friend of mine that says, oh, I can eat gluten. Gluten is not a problem for me. Yeah, it might not be a problem for you now, but the fact is that you're eating GMO and glyphosate.
And can I share about gluten? So
Go ahead.
I worked with a practitioner, holistic nutritionist, and at the beginning of my time with her, I did a PCR stool test, which is the sort of the top standard of testing, which actually looks for DNA of the various microbes in the sample. So it's very accurate. So at the beginning of my time with her, we did the test, and then at the end, we did the test. Now, near the end of my time with her, I was starting to test more foods. And
Okay.
part of that was a little bit of gluten.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, I felt fine. Like my body could tolerate it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yet, when we got the test results back, my zonulin levels had doubled. Actually, I think more than doubled. And zonulin is sort of a pre-marker for leaky gut. It's saying it's reacting to that gluten. It's causing your body to have a reaction. Even though you might not feel it physically, you're still doing damage internally to the body. So these people say, oh, I'm fine with gluten. Maybe you feel fine. But if you had that test, I bet, dollars to donuts, you might see differently in the actual, results of what those tests are showing.
Okay, I have questions about that test, but I just want to share something. Sometimes I think that we're looking for symptoms that are directly related to, let's say, like we're going to think gluten, okay, gut symptoms.
Right.
But there was a phase a couple of years ago where after not eating gluten for a really long time, I had cut dairy, gluten, a lot of sugar, and I was feeling fantastic. I had so much energy, so much clarity, and my skin looked great. And I was just in top shape, exercising a lot. And then, I'm a big baguette person. I mean, fresh bread, like
I
I
know.
was raised on baguette. That's my mother came from Gaspésie and she was raised on a farm. She had 16 brothers and sisters, very poor. And they ate bread and potato and carrots and meat occasionally. But, bread, meat, and potato was how I was raised, even though I didn't like it, except the bread. All that to say that it's been always so ingrained, and not just the baguette, also the fluffy white sliced bread with
Hmm.
peanut butter. I mean, is there anything better?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I was doing really good. I cut all of that because it, I was into my awareness about the gluten and stuff. And then one day I just went back to my old habits and was eating a lot of gluten. So my partner is celiac, so he can't have any. So if I'm going to buy any bread, I got to finish it. Right.
Right.
And then one day I'm going down the stairs and I'm like an old woman. I'm like, oh, like my joints. And I'm like, oh my God, I was all rusty and moody and no energy. And then I clicked. I was like, fucking shit, it's the gluten.
Yeah.
And I stopped it a day later, or maybe a couple of days later, the symptoms were gone. So the symptoms were in my joint and in my mood.
Absolutely. And I notice it where if I eat like a heavier meal with gluten, I just want to fall asleep. Like it sucks every bit of energy right from me almost instantly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what does PCR stand for?
It's a scientific term I would have to look up that I can't quite recall.
Okay,
but yeah. It's sort of the like I said, it's the gold standard. Even with COVID now, that's how they're looking for it. They're looking for actual DNA of the virus in the sample, so they'll see it. And it is very accurate. But the test that I had is called the GI map.
Okay,
and
yeah. I was going to ask you, is that the GI map?
It is, yes. And so it's fantastic because it will show you all the bugs that you've got going on in your microbiome, and it will classify them as, which ones are the beneficial bugs, which ones could be pathogenic, which ones are the opportunists that, given the right opportunity, they might start to take over, So it really gives you a great picture of what exactly you have going on in there. Because the other thing that I've found through my journey is that it really is not, there's no cookie cutter approach. You can follow a protocol per se, but when it comes down to it, and how I kind of really got myself to a better place was really tailoring it specifically to what was going on for me in my gut.
Yeah. So the first question that pops up for me, and can you hear the blue jay?
Yeah, I love them. I haven't seen them.
You do?
We have them, just not around my area for some reason.
Really? So they're very loud. So the question that pops up is, so you did the SIBO first, then the GI map?
GI map came quite a bit later. I did the SIBO test. So if I go back, so I went immediately into sort of the regular protocol again of what they do for SIBO. I started on rifaximin, which is the antibiotic, which is recommended. I
Say
think
the
that
name
was
again?
rifaximin. It's RIFAXAMIN, rifaximin.
Okay, and that's from the doctor.
From the doctor. So again, I had to go back to him, explain, this is the standard, again, using their language, this is the standard of care for SIBO, right? And knowing that it is basically, the neat thing about that as an antibiotic is it stays localized to the small intestines. So we're not going to wipe out that good bacteria in the colon. It's going to stay where it needs to act in the small intestine. So did that for 2 weeks. I'm waiting around. You hear about all these people having symptoms, that it's working. They might have some die-off reaction. They might have headache. They might not feel great. I'm like, I feel okay. Is this doing anything? That, finished that round, didn't really do anything, went into the herbals, right? Started on all this herbal protocol that went on for about 2 months, I would say, of that. When that sort of really wasn't showing anything, we went at it again. This time I added a biofilm disruptor. I also learned that because of the kind of SIBO that I had, the new research was showing that you're wanting to double up, not just give rifaximin, but also give metronidazole, because one of them addresses the hydrogen dominant SIBO, one addresses the methane dominant SIBO. So used in concert, they had a better outcome.
Are both prescribed by the doctor?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your naturopath is guiding you in the interpretation of the SIBO test?
Yes.
Yeah, because your doctor.
But no, exactly. But it was through my research of understanding, I recognize I have both, gases showing up in my SIBO test, that really the rifaximin on its own isn't going to cut it. especially if I had gone through, several months now of treatment with not really seeing any result. So this went on for a while. I went back, I did another round of rifaximin, adding in the metronidazole, adding in the biofilm disruptor, still not really seeing anything. At that point, the naturopath's like, okay, something else is going on, which is exactly where I was at. I said, yeah, something else is going on.
Okay.
At that point was when we thought, could it be Lyme? Could there be other, what we call stealth infections happening there? So off we go, another blood draw. This time the blood is sent all the way to Germany to Armin Labs to do their TIC-PLEC plus testing, and finding out, what is happening there. Of course, that result comes in. Yes, you have tested positive for Borrelia, and which is the bacteria that causes Lyme, and all the associated co-infections that often go along with that. Because when a tick bites you, it's not just carrying one bug. It typically has several, right? So you could be exposed and pick up all of those things. So there's often Babesia, Bartonella, Rickettsia, Anaplasma. There's like a host of other things that often go in concert. And that's why Lyme is really hard for doctors to deal with and diagnose too, because it might not be the Borrelia that's giving you symptoms. You could be having symptoms from Babesia, Bartonella, which aren't that well understood. So, imagine all these potential combinations of bugs being in action. It is really hard for a doctor to figure that out. So I don't
Yeah.
really fault them for that, but yeah, so we found that was at play.
Okay, hold
Went
on.
down. Yep.
Do you remember getting bitten by a tick? Did you see?
I do not. And
Yeah.
that is the thing as well. Of course, I live in the mountains, I'm out hiking. Protect yourself, you think, but who knows, right? And
Yeah.
actually, what I've learned in my research too is you could potentially even be infected by a nymph, not even a full grown tick. And the nymphs are barely visible to the eye. And the doctor that I listened to on that was saying, you could be sitting on a rock and get, infected that way. So you just don't know.
Yeah, we don't want to scare people either, but it is a
No.
reality depending on, it's a big reality here in the
Yeah.
eastern townships of Quebec and eastern United States, eastern Canada, but it's coming all the way over to your side too, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my dog had anaplasma too, and my dog's, yeah, I'm not going to get into that, but everything is natural here, and so I don't do any of the chemical treatment, which is
Yeah.
so bad for animals.
Yeah. There
Personal
is a
choice.
product on the market called Pi, P-I, as an insect repellent. Now, it doesn't contain DEET. It does contain an ingredient, and I can't remember the name, but that ingredient is the only ingredient, as far as I understand, that actually is proven to repel ticks.
Okay.
And I think it's that same ingredient found in an Avon product that people often use. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is what they've said has shown to actually repel them and keep them away.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so that Armin lab in Germany, do they specialize in Lyme or how do they?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it is one of their panels that is shown to really pick it up, because in North, and I'd had Lyme testing here, but it is the very basic ELISA test, which often has very high levels of false
Yeah.
negatives. I'd had it twice and they said, nope, not Lyme, not Lyme. And when I sent it there, it's like, well, guess what? So it's just a higher sophistication of testing. There is another lab in the US called IGenix, which also is quite good for Lyme testing. So either of those labs are the ones that are recommended for people who really want to investigate that.
Yeah. Why not use a test that actually work? Why would you? That just
Yeah.
sounds ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
How much is the test for Lyme through the Armin lab?
I think it was around, so here's the thing. So you do the initial test, which will show you, have you been exposed, right? It's going to show you, do you have an antibody? Like, did your body mount a reaction. Your immune system mounted a reaction to this. But that infection could have been years ago, could have been yesterday. You don't know if it's active in your body right now. So then we had to do the follow-up testing, which is called the ELISpot testing. And that was the one that showed me which things are actually alive and well and doing something in the body, which ones are sleeping, because you don't really want to go in there guns blazing
Yeah.
at this stuff if it's dormant, right? So that's kind of an important piece. So with the initial test, then the follow-up ELISpot, I think it was around 1,500. Yeah.
1,500. Okay.
Yeah.
Just good to know. I want
Yeah.
everything to be out on the podcast because, yeah, you got to do what you got to do. So,
Yeah.
and I want people to know these things. And so thank you for sharing. So 1,500, is that Canadian or US?
Canadian. Yeah.
Canadian.
Canadian.
Okay. Okay. So that's maybe right now, $1,100 US.
Yeah.
Our dollar sucks right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to go back quickly so at that point, had you done the GI map or is the GI map later?
That's later again.
That's
Yeah.
later. Okay.
So went through sort of some, treatment for boosting my immune system, because what we found through those ELISpot tests were that, yeah, actually most of my stuff was dormant. Some Epstein-Barr was there a little bit, not super crazy. And so I said, well, I really want to keep this stuff, where it is. I don't want it to come awake and cause havoc. Let's work on really boosting the immune system, getting all of that up and running. So for that, we did some ozone therapy, IV ozone.
What is that?
So that's actually where you have it done. I had it done in my naturopath's office. She injects a saline solution with ozone gas and takes some of my blood out, mixes it with that ozone concoction and reinfuses it into the body. So it's extra oxygenating the blood is kind of the theory of how it kind of works.
Okay.
Yeah. And so had some sessions with that, also working really on improving the detoxification pathways in my body. So infrared sauna, dry brushing, those kinds of modalities, really trying to, like I said, clear that toxic load, right? I also had mycotoxin testing done. Because often we find with SIBO that isn't responding to treatment, there can be a mold component. So I had, I got a test kit. I swiped my house, sent it away, because I was paranoid. I mean, when you get into mold, that really scares you, right?
I
You
know.
think of all of that. And we had just built this home. We've been in it 7 years. So we built it. No water damage, a lot of mold comes from being in a water damaged building, but I'm like, who knows? Like, could there be something there we don't see, that we don't know? So thankfully the house swab came back fine. My house is clean.
Yeah.
But yet still some mycotoxins were showing up on the mycotoxin tests that I had done.
Okay.
So a lot of that does come from food.
Yeah.
Though, right? Again, in various crops. And luckily I didn't have the bad toxic black mold, the Stachybotrys, show up. That one was not there. So I was like, phew, it was more like Aspergillus and some of these other species that are a little bit more common. But yeah, so clearing, detoxifying the body. I also did use some oral things that will bind if there's anything in there to kind of clear it out.
Okay.
Some bentonite clays and a prescription called cholestyramine, which will also help to get rid of things. So did that whole protocol. And again, it was about this time last year, finishing up all of that and saying, I'm still not there yet. I'm watching my diet after I'd kind of done the herbal antibiotics, the prescription antibiotics. I went on a very, very restricted diet. You may know the SIBO biphasic diet,
Yeah.
and really cleaned everything up. But I'm like, why am I still having issues, with this gut stuff? Definitely changing the diet helped, but it wasn't like I felt fantastic. So at that point, I'm like, okay, what's showing up here? I actually got a huge piece of paper and I mapped everything out. What are all the underlying causes of SIBO? What are all my issues? What are all the tests I've had done? Looking at it from that visual sort of bird's eye view, I'm saying EBV is kind of a player here. You know, this Epstein-Barr is showing up. Who do I know in this world that can kind of really help me with that? And that's what put me in line with Dr. Kasha Kynes down in the US, who is a EBV champion. She's written a book, The Epstein-Barr Virus Solution. And I got in contact with her and I worked with her for 4 months. And that's when she said, okay, before we work together, we're going to do that GI map. And at the end of our work together, we're going to do that GI map again and see where we're at. So that's where that test came in.
Okay. The EBV shows up on a GI map?
No. Oh, actually, yes. In the GI map, it is on there, but it showed up through that Armin Labs testing that I had done as well as one of the panels that I had done. So it wasn't just the TICPlex
Yeah.
plus one that I had, but some other panels were run as well.
Okay. But then you said you did the GI map at the beginning and then at the end. What
Yeah.
confirmed that EBV was taken care of then?
It actually had shown that, yeah, it was not showing up on that GI map.
Okay.
Symptom wise, you know, I all was good there. What my main symptom with it was the brain fogginess and, you know, forgetting words. And I was like getting really scared. I sat down at my computer one day and I couldn't remember how to turn it on. I was like, what? Like, I'm looking at it. You know, I'm like, wait a minute, you know, that was scary.
Yeah.
You know, so not being able, like, I could see a picture a person in my mind and the name wasn't there. You know, I'd be writing something and I'd go back and look at it later and kind of like the wrong word I would have typed out.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no,
No.
we've got to get that looked after.
Well, I'm glad that you said that because I think often people will think maybe they're just losing their memory, or maybe it's normal in some way, or there's something wrong with their brain.
Yeah.
But there's something wrong with the brain because there's something else going on in the body. I had a phase too. I think it was last summer that I kept saying, "I'm not myself. I'm not myself. Like there's something wrong with me." And oh,
Oh, we got stuck a
okay.
little bit.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, for me, it turns out la piste, the hint was that we went down to explore was potential thyroid issues, and just simple supplements and changes that I've made, and now I'm back to being myself.
Great.
A little more. I'm not 100%, but that's gone because I had those moments too that I would just completely blank out, and it's like, what? No,
Yeah.
I turned 50. I'm young,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you find Dr. Kasha Kynes?
Honestly, it was universal divine intervention. I
Yeah.
somehow got on a podcast on women's hormones or something, and she was the guest, and she was mentioning her book. And I thought, huh, well, here's this EBV showing up again. You know, she's mentioning this book. Ran out and got the book, you know, voraciously consuming it. I don't read, I consume books.
Yeah.
And thinking, okay, I think this is the woman, because she, previous to really getting into EBV and studying that, she worked with a lot of SIBO patients as a holistic nutritionist. That, you know, she was seeing so many people with gut things and really kind of got into the SIBO world, and so she really understood that. And that was important for me in working with a practitioner. I was like, I need somebody who's, you know, right up to speed on this,
Yeah.
and has this other side of the coin with this EBV knowledge. And so, yeah, it was a great match in
Wow.
finding her. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you read the book and then you decided to hire her?
Yeah, we had a chat online and I just kind of explained where I was coming from, and she explained, you know, how she works with people. And I just was at that point, like, now I was almost 2 years into this journey of still not quite getting there. spending all this money, tests, supplements, you name it, like, and still just kind of not feeling great. And I said, something's got to give. So it was, I just had a really good feeling about her, and just sort of how, again, I was sort of aligned in her direction. And, of course it was not inexpensive,
Yeah.
that part of my journey, but, you're at a point where you're like, what else can I do? Right.
Yeah.
If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And yeah, so.
So can you share the cost of working with her and how she worked with her to just to illustrate what that kind of experience looks like?
Yeah, so I worked with her exclusively for 4 months. So at the beginning, for the first month, we had weekly, I think it was 2-hour calls.
Wow.
Yeah, and very in depth, intake, the whole functional diagnostic intake. And
Is she
then
a
we work.
functional doctor?
She's a functional nutritionist.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then we spaced it out. I think it was every couple of weeks. Um, and again, just, we did it all virtually. She's down in Washington State. And, it was a $10,000 investment, into Canadian funds, right? When you did the conversion at that time.
Okay.
I forget what the actual dollar figure was in US funds.
Hmm.
But she guided me through, supplements. It was a very rigorous protocol. I
Oh
was
yeah.
taking a lot of stuff, but in the end, it all paid off. It really did. I now am able to eat so many more things that I, previously wasn't able to tolerate. I am feeling better. Like I said, I don't have that brain fogginess anymore. None of that sort of stuff. I was even previously having some skin symptoms, like every now and then I would kind of get this really itchy patch on my knees and on my elbows. None of that anymore.
Okay.
That's all gone. So yeah, just it was it was worth every penny, I have to say. Yeah.
So what did it look like, the protocol, if you can take us through that 4-month journey? Did she give you a specific diet? And if so, what was it? And give us a glimpse of the supplements.
Yeah, it was more on the supplement side. The diet, I was still maintaining pretty much a combination between biphasic and a low FODMAP diet.
Okay.
Towards the end, though, she really guided me into more of food reintroduction, because I was petrified, and that is one of the problems with SIBO and going on a restricted diet. A lot of people end up with disordered eating, fear of food,
Mm.
right? Because you don't want to go back to feeling so crappy. Your food is your safety net. And yet we do know that people on restricted diets will start to have nutritional deficiencies,
Yeah.
right? It's not meant to be followed long term. So
Yeah.
she really guided me through that. But with the supplements, it was really focused on gut healing, because what I was doing before was so focused on eradication. Let's bomb those bitches,
Yeah.
right? It was like I wanted to throw everything I could at them. But I have to say, part of it too then was mindset shift, right? Like in that scenario, I'm looking at my body as against me,
Yeah.
right? Why is it betraying me? This is something bad. I want to get rid of it. So I think part of my healing really came when I when I switched that around, and it was like, my body is giving me signals. It's saying, help me.
Yeah.
My body is my friend. It's not betraying me. I really had to look at it from that perspective. So we really focused on gut healing, taking things like L-glutamine, um, another gut soothing herbs. There was aloe in there. And then work, a little bit on the eradication side, things like lysine, which works on a lot of the herpes viruses that we carry. Like there's, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 strains of herpes virus that a lot of people have, that can be, again, they hide, they're dormant until maybe you catch a cold, or maybe your immune system is low, or maybe you're under a lot of stress. And then, hello, here it is. And it's starting to do things in the body, right? So again, we wanted to kind of boost up the immune system, suppress the other things, work on gut healing. Licorice, I took, selenium was a big one, because I also have Hashimoto's. So selenium for thyroid is huge. And taking selenium with N-acetylcysteine, which are the precursors for glutathione production, very important antioxidant in the body that we need. So yeah, lots of that. And even the fat soluble vitamins, right? So your vitamin A, your vitamin D, even K, those kinds of things. And then she also helped me ease into probiotics because again, I was frightened to death of probiotics. And when you think of gut health, pretty much every magazine has an article on gut health these days, and they're all saying, take your probiotics, which kind of the worst advice you can give to somebody with SIBO. You've got too much bacteria where it doesn't need to be. Why would you want to feed it more?
Yeah.
Right? So prebiotics and probiotics were like, I don't know about that. But she helped me find the ones that are well tolerated for people with SIBO. Also Saccharomyces boulardii, which is actually a yeast, very beneficial yeast, which can help combat candida. Because I had candida show up on that first GI map. By taking that Saccharomyces boulardii, on the end result, no more candida.
Just back to the probiotics, there's a particular brand. Can you name the brand that you took? Do you remember?
Yeah, so it's called Ultra Flora Integrity by Metagenics.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
There's
it is
enough.
a it is a lactobacillus species. And also, just real quick, what I've learned in my SIBO education is we kind of need three kinds of probiotics. You want to have a lactobacillus/bifido species, the Saccharomyces boulardii, and also spore forming or soil based probiotics, which are often the bacillus species. So when we have all three of those, that's what really creates that healthy microbiome.
Yes, and just side note, often those are not supplements or probiotics you can get at Whole Foods.
Right.
It's something that functional practitioners can get. There's a company I'm trying to remember. I'll find it and link it in the show notes. But I mean, I don't even know if it's worth to do that because unless you work with a practitioner, you can't get it. But they specialize in probiotics for SIBO, so they created that special formula
Right.
that if you have SIBO, you can take it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great doctor who really goes into all this. He's a SIBO doctor, Dr. Ruscio. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
familiar with him, but
Yeah.
he is a great resource for anybody who wants to really learn more about how do I take probiotics. I have SIBO, I have gut issues. He would be a great doctor to listen to his podcast and
Yeah.
check out his stuff.
Yeah, I listened to his podcast. He talks. I think he created a shake, like an
Yeah,
elemental diet shake,
that's
and
right.
he's been working on it a lot because apparently it was disgusting, and
Yeah.
some people with SIBO will take that for a while because they can't eat anything. And
Yeah, I almost went that road. So
yeah,
when I wasn't getting any results, that was sort of one avenue that we were looking at, because that is kind of the progression. You do the antibiotics, you do the herbals, you're still not getting results, then you go on the elemental diet. But what actually was my saving grace from not having to do that was a test that came available finally in Canada called the IBS Smart Test.
okay.
Previous to that, it was only in the States, and it's a blood test that looks for two antibodies which are produced if a person has food poisoning or has had food poisoning. What they are
Who
now,
hasn't had food poisoning? I mean, I just
right?
had it again 2 weeks ago.
Right. So in that scenario, what happens is your body has this pathogen and it eventually clears that pathogen, but in some people, the body still thinks it is there. It starts to produce an antibody called antivinculin, and that antibody damages the nerves in your migrating motor complex. Not to get too technical here, but that's the sweeper that moves stuff through your intestines. When that sweeper's not sweeping and it stops or it's very damaged, that's when bacteria can start to grow. And now what the research is finding is that is the number one cause of SIBO is food poisoning. And so when I did my IBS smart test, it came back that I tested positive for antivinculin. So now I know that in my case, my body's going to keep cranking that out. My SIBO cannot technically be cured, but needs to be managed. So that was a big, big, big piece of data that was really critically important for me, because otherwise I would keep throwing money at trying to eradicate it, going through all these hoops why do I need to do that?
Yeah. Okay. I do want to say though that anything is curable. I have to say
Yes.
that. I know some people will say, yeah, some people will fight me on this, but that's okay. If you resist what I just said, you might need to look at this. So just a little bit on this, and it's these are the conversations I want to have more on the podcast from now on in season 3 and 4, and it's the energetics of healing and the state of mind, or not state of mind, sorry, the capacity that the body has to truly heal itself. That's where I'm taking that conversation. And I'm glad you've had a lot of progress on your journey to glow. And I wouldn't be surprised that the missing piece is that piece, that true healing component that you need to look at and that I need to look at. And I'm saying this here because, and I say this all the time, but people write to me and they say that they've tried everything. And I know that it's not true. You most likely haven't tried as much as Ramona and I. Or if you have, get in touch. I'll have you on the podcast and you'll be a case study. And there is always a missing link. And that's my work as a transformative coach. I look for the missing link. I look to the invisible. I look to the power of the God particle in our body.
Yeah, absolutely. And, technically, like I said, I'm not healed, but I feel fantastic. I feel the best that I've felt in years. So, if I didn't know any better, I would think, no problem, all
Yeah.
is well. There's still certain things I have to be careful of food wise. And I know what my sort of triggers are.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I look to food, not with dread, not with, anger, I can't eat this and everybody else is eating it. It's not fair, So again, it's that piece, like you said, it is sort of there is that mental component or that mind body connection component. And when I do
Emotional.
emotional, yeah, when I do get feedback from my body, that's what I look at it as. It's feedback. It's trying to tell me something. And how can I help,
I'm glad that you said that. And yeah, the reason why I had to pause and point this out is because in dermatology, they say that rosacea is incurable and that they don't know the cause. And yet I have interviewed personally and sat to lunch, meeting women face to face that their skin is completely clear. And one of the latest guests that I had is Georgie Holbrook, and she had a severe case of rosacea. Her face was deforming, and now I've seen her live on video, up
yeah,
close and personal, and her skin is completely clear. So it is just not true that
yeah,
rosacea is incurable. And it's having me question what else is not true. How else have we been misled because of um, the lack of willingness to dive deeper. So I appreciate conventional medicine for specific things. I think they're really good at, piecing my arm back together after I've had a snowboarding accident, or maybe a heart surgery if you need it, like much respect.
yeah,
But there is also functional medicine, naturopathy, herbalism, Ayurveda. There's also so many other modality and energy medicine
yeah.
and frequency work, which might sound very woo, but at some point we need to acknowledge that we are like a holistic being and there's many layers to our beingness,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So
Hmm.
I want to direct that conversation in future podcast episodes and in the programs that we're going to offer. Like, I'm interested in offering really practical programs for nutrition, but I'm, after 2 years committed to my journey to glow, I keep going back over and over to the fact that the missing link is that inquiry of what does it really take for a body to truly heal. And sometimes it's something as simple as removing a food that's toxic for you. I have a guest that her episode's going to come out, and it was uh, well, oh man, what's it called again? See, the brain fog. Melissa Gallico, she wrote a book. I'm going to cut this out because I'm not going to remember, but it was in water. It's not chlorine in the water. Fluoride, sorry.
Fluoride. Yeah.
Fluoride in the water. So she removed the fluoride Or she realized that the fluoride in the water was giving her acne, so she changed the water, her acne was gone. For her, it was pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also a pretty straightforward gal in her thinking. But there are some of us that are more emotional in our healing and in our life, and our journey is different. And because we're all unique, we're going to have to look at it in a different way. So the point of really hammering this home is because I want people to, when they listen to this podcast, I want them to know that there is always a solution. There's
Absolutely.
always a way.
And that was me. I mean, I was like a dog with a bone with this whole thing. I'm like, I'm figuring it out. My doctor's like IBS. I'm like, bullshit. It's a throwaway diagnosis. Don't be telling me it's IBS. I'll come back and I'll tell you what it is. And that's exactly what I did. And I, I just, yeah, I said no. And even when they said it was SIBO, I'm like, that's not the answer. SIBO's not a self-standing diagnosis. It's always caused from something else. So what is it?
Yeah.
And just dig, be a detective. You have to be. And if it's not your thing, find somebody, find someone like me who geeks out on the research and make
Yeah,
them do it for you, but
absolutely.
there's a way. There's where there, like literally that saying, where there is a will, there is a way.
Yes. And then the last subtlety, I guess, I want to bring, or the thing I want people to be discerning of, is that, you went through your journey to glow. You had highs and lows, but the consistency that I see from you is that curious, open state of mind and that willingness to know.
Yeah.
And to me, when I tap into you and I feel that energy, I'm feeling like a curiosity that has an opening and an openness. So you might have been a dog with a bone, but not, I don't see you walking around banging your head with that bone. Like maybe once in a while, but then you would drop it and you would get to work from a clear state of mind,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So on our journey to glow, where things start to go wrong for a lot of people is that they make it personal. They beat themselves up. They look in the mirror and their chatter, the chatter in their head is just so negative, and there's no self-love, there's no compassion. And then it's like you're stuck in this cycle that you don't have an open state of mind anymore. You don't have that lightness of being, that curiosity, that possibility that will point you to that thing you didn't think about.
Right.
Right? That day that I'm in bed and I'm suffering from food poisoning and we're chatting, I have an open state of mind. I'm curious. And you're bringing me like a bunch of other clues that I can explore on my journey to glow. And if I look back, it's funny because some people could say, oh my God, that's exhausting. It's so much money and it's so much work. And I'm like, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, if you had asked me when I did the Creating the Impossible challenge with my coach, my mentor coach, where for the first time in 5 years, my Creating the Impossible challenge was not business related, not money related. I was bored with all of that. And I was like, what could I pick? Heal rosacea in 3 months. That sounds impossible because I had never even looked at it. And more about the idea of creating the impossible is that it's a process to get you on the path to possibility. So really nothing is impossible. It's just to challenge that thinking of what is truly possible and impossible. So all that to say that one idea out of the blue on January 5th, starting that program with my mentor coach, is why now Journey to Glow is born, with 50 plus podcast episodes, like a ton of blog articles, a thriving community, and upcoming programs, and just the possibility to change the conversation about what is possible for skin healing. And that's what I'm here to challenge. But
I
so
love that.
yeah, so just highlighting that the underlying thread was that state of mind. And it's not that I don't, that I'm always in a good mood and that I'm always happy to edit those podcast episodes, but that energetic thread is important for us to look at. Otherwise, we're going to be exhausted, and we don't need to do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, a journey is a journey. Like you said, it's never, lightness and happy rainbow days every day. There are days I sat on my couch, so pissed off at the world, so mad, just feeling sorry for myself and just having like these horrible days. But the thing is, you have to feel your feelings, give yourself permission for that, but don't stay there. Don't allow yourself to be sucked into what I call the quicksand of despair, right? You've got to feel that, but then move through that. So yeah,
Okay.
it's a journey. The big game changer for me was hydrochloric acid. What we found was it wasn't just SIBO. Normally the body would not enable SIBO because we have stomach acid, we have pancreatic enzymes, bile, all these things. Well, in me, I happen to have that perfect storm. In my 30s, I had my gallbladder taken out, so my bile production is not ideal. The stomach acid production was way low, and the pancreatic enzyme output was not there. So when you have all that going on, of course, that's creating that ripe environment that as soon as bacteria is there, it can overgrow.
Yeah. Yeah, we just jumped to that because I just shared that I had my lunch a little too fast and I ate my lunch too quickly, but I did take my digestive enzyme. And now that I think about it, in the last week, I have felt a difference from the digestive enzyme just because it's something, I think I have a bug or something in my belly and it's helping me. Yeah, but it's one of those things that the effect can be subtle, like it just helps and you're like, is this really working?
Yeah, yeah. And if you're trying some other things at the same time, it can be hard to pinpoint what exactly is the one thing that's making the difference.
Yeah. So I wanted to wrap up and ask you where you're at today after this wonderful journey. And then I want to hear about your key takeaways.
Yeah, so I thankfully have felt that I have turned a major corner just through that work with the holistic nutritionist and all that major work on gut restoration, gut healing. Now introducing new foods. You may have seen my Facebook post. I got very excited when I was able to eat 5 cherries. Growing up in Niagara in the hotbed there of fruit and orchards and all of that, eating that stuff in season was always like the best thing ever. And with SIBO, a lot of those fruits were big no-nos. So now that I can even eat just a handful of cherries, it's like, wow, that's awesome. So yeah, I feel really great. I mean, again, it's not perfect. I have to be aware of just how much of certain things I'm eating, know my triggers, but generally my energy is great. My mood is great. My ability to focus and concentrate is much improved. So I feel like a whole different person basically than I was a year ago at this time.
I was surprised when you said that well, that's amazing. That's great. That's amazing. I was surprised that you said that what did you say? That you devour books?
Yes, I consume them.
You consume books?
Yeah.
And my thought was, oh, wow, you're lucky. You were lucky to still be able to concentrate because that's one of the side effects or symptoms that I've noticed is the lack of ability of processing information
Yeah.
and reading something that requires my focus.
I find that because I'm so interested in the subject matter, it's much easier, trying to do that with something that maybe you're not as interested in. It's a little
Yeah.
more challenging as I'm finding with some of my studies right now, but
Ah,
yeah, give
yeah.
me SIBO info and I'm all over it. Biochemistry, not so much.
Yeah. Well, that's why I created the podcast because some of us like to read, some of us like to listen. That's my favorite way of learning. Even sitting down to watch a video, like I don't have time. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't want to sit down. I'm already sitting down at my computer to work for my
Yeah.
business coaching. Although I will take calls standing up often, but pop in a podcast, go for a walk, go work in the garden, pull up some weeds, or just move. And then you just grab the information that you need and you drop the rest, and at least you're processing without over focusing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are your biggest takeaways from that journey?
Honestly, you you really need to be your own advocate. I kind of have this saying, doctors are smart, but they don't know everything. And I think, our generation is getting better at recognizing that. Our parents usually, like, everything the doctor says goes, they're God, they know it all. Whereas I look at it from the point of view as, I have critical thinking skills. That's sort of the gift that we have as humans, what differentiates us from animals. So it sort of behooves me to take a viewpoint or an opinion, but then still do my own due diligence, my own research, run it through my own filters, check in with my inner guidance system. Is this making sense for me? And then, making my choices and decisions from that. So I advocate heavily, like, do your own research, check into things,
Put your
and
back.
advocate for yourself, you know? Yeah.
I'm going to have you repeat that last sentence and just put your head
Okay.
back. I'll edit that.
Okay.
Okay. Last sentence.
Yeah. Just really, you need to educate yourself and advocate. Don't take no for an answer. If something that the doctor's telling you doesn't sit right with you, just because they have, their degree up on the wall, doesn't mean they know it all. And in medicine, it's changing by the minute. It's really hard for them to stay on top of their field. Whereas if you're listening to podcasts, you're up on the research, you probably do know more than them in some instances.
Yeah.
So bring that forward to them in a spirit of sharing. And most of the time they're very open to that.
Yeah. That's how I feel about rosacea. At the beginning, I was looking for the expert. And very quickly, I realized that different allies were going to support me in different ways, whether it's functional nutrition or holistic nutrition or naturopathy, and, trying different tests. And I've learned different things from different people, practitioners also, and even naturopathic doctors all have their different ways of thinking about things and their different ways of interacting with their patients. And knowing also who I like to work with, the kind of decisiveness that I'm looking for, and the kind of expertise. And I guess also, I'm going to finish my thought, but I feel like I have become an expert in rosacea way more than most dermatologists, sorry to say, because
Yeah.
no, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. They just spew out always the same information, and then they, smack you with that label of an incurable disease. And again, it's not true. I've seen it.
Yeah.
But also knowing who you work well with. I work well with experts. That's why I'm glad that you found that Dr. Kasha that, you invested 10 grand, but she was an expert in EBV,
Mm-hmm.
and you made progress, and you had a plan, and, you had a strong direction to follow. And now here you are, as opposed to, you could work with a practitioner that maybe is too much of a generalist, or it's too superficial. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the point that I was at. I felt like I'd kind of outgrown my naturopath, even the doctor. It seemed like I was going to appointments saying, what about this? And what about this? And, recommending things, and they would just agree with me, but I was directing the treatment, So at that point I'm like, okay, I need to go outside of this and seek out somebody else. And it does take a team. I've got an acupuncturist. I did visceral manipulation, again, focusing on diet with a nutritionist. So you have to source those experts that really round out your treatment as well.
Yeah, I'm interested in acupuncture. I'm just a little resistant because one of my clients a few years back was working with her teacher, her acupuncture teacher, and he punctured her lung.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was not good. And that's always stuck with me. I would also like to try facial acupuncture, and no one is doing it around here. I'd have to go to Montreal. I think I did find one person in Montreal, but I thought that could be interesting, facial acupuncture.
Mm-hmm. I would say definitely, check into that.
Yeah. So now you have become a herbalist, or you're becoming a herbalist?
I'm blossoming into one. I'm still in early on in my learning. It's a long road. I'm trying to fast track it, but there's a lot of info to cram into this 50-year-old brain that doesn't work like a 20-year-old brain. But I'm loving it. Yeah. And it was really through this whole journey is what led me down that road. As I was doing the herbal protocols for SIBO and understanding what these herbs do and all of that and seeing the power of that. I've always been interested in natural medicine anyway, but that just sort of rekindled it all. And now I'm fascinated. It's amazing.
That's great. That's great. Okay, last question. If people want to get in touch with you, where do you hang out? Do you have a special invitation for people?
I'm on Facebook and I do have an Instagram page just under my name. And I encourage people, again, if some of these symptoms that I've talked about today are resonating with you, you're bloating right after you eat, you got, really uncomfortable abdomen, changing in your bowel habits, all of that sort of thing. Doctors aren't very helpful. Maybe you've brought up SIBO to your doctor and they gave you the eye roll or they told you it's not a thing or, tried to give you antidepressants or all these other stories that I hear. Honestly, it would make your hair curl. I encourage you to reach out to me. I'd be happy to have a conversation just to point you in the direction of some resources, things that you can bring forward to your doctor, how to talk to your doctor more, maybe so that they're more apt to listen to you when it's time to cut ties with your doctor and maybe go elsewhere. All of that. So yeah, I just really want to help educate people and help them advocate for themselves.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ramona. It's been very interesting. I've taken a lot of notes, and I know that this is the kind of episode that I'm going to go back and listen to again, and I'm sure people are going to bookmark it and go back to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been great. I really want to get the word out. So if we can even help one person through this, I feel joy.
Yeah, thank you.